A woman out walking her dog on the morning of Thursday, the 13th of February, 1997, at around 8 a.m. on Forge Lane in Birmingham, makes a shocking and horrific discovery. It was the body of a young black man. He'd been executed in the back of his head in his car. This man was 33-year-old David Gooden, also known by the nickname Shubs. Who killed 33-year-old David Gooden, and why? Forge Lane, on the borders of West Bromwich and Handsworth, known to the locals as the Bush, due to the thick overgrowth of trees that hang down over the narrow road. But it's most commonly known to the locals as Lover's Lane, due to courting couples often meeting up in cars in the car park on the lane. And it would be here, on the morning of Thursday the 13th of February, 1997, where at approximately 8 a.m, a woman had been walking her dog and she noticed the car parked near the Lover's Lane car park. The car was partially hidden in bushes and she went over to inquire. To her horror, she saw the body of a young black man slumped at the wheel of the car. He'd been shot in the back of his head. In a panic, the female dog walker rushed to get some help and approached a male jogger who was passing by. They then called the police. Initially, police had no idea who the unidentified man was and appealed to the public through the media for any information. And it was whilst watching the news the next day, a woman recognised the description of the car found with the executed man and became concerned as it matched the description of her ex-husband. Noreen Gooden from Ward End, Birmingham, had been separated from her ex-husband David Gooden for the past 5 years, but they remained friends and he often came to visit his two sons they had together, 10-year-old Daniel and 5-year-old Reese. Noreen had last heard from her ex-husband David the evening before when he was on his way to her home to drop off some trainers for their two sons. But at around 7 p.m. that evening, David had called his ex-wife Noreen to say he'd be an hour late, but he never showed up. 33-year-old David Gooden was the co-director of Secure Keys Properties, a lettings agency on Moseley Road in Moseley, Birmingham, and he had been driving a rented green convertible Saab car, the same car that the news report had claimed the body of a man had been found in. Concerned, Noreen called David's office, but they said they hadn't seen him all day. And when she couldn't get hold of him, Noreen called the police, and it was then that she was told that the body of the man found on a car park in Lover's Lane, who had been executed in the back of his head, was that of her ex-husband David Gooden. He had been killed in his car by a single gunshot from a sawn-off shotgun to the back of the head, killing him instantly. David had lived with his girlfriend, 27-year-old Diane Gray, in Ladywood, Birmingham, and when she heard the news, she was said to be distraught. One of David's sisters, Fiona Hanson, told the media, "David was so proud of his business. He was a family man and on his way to see his two kids when he was murdered." His ex-wife Noreen said, "He loved his sons and looked after us very well." And when Noreen broke the news of what happened to their father, to their sons, they were distraught. David's ex-wife and distraught girlfriend Diane were questioned by police so they could try and build up a picture of his life. Detective Superintendent Malcolm Ross was put in charge of the inquiry and described it as a cold-blooded execution, saying, "Mr. Gooden may have been lured to the scene where he was murdered, or he may have been ordered there at gunpoint, but at the moment it's a complete mystery. When David's body had been found, he had a large amount of money that was found in his pockets. David was known to have collected cash from his tenants, but if large amounts of cash were found in his pockets, then the motive couldn't have been robbery. Apart from a few minor convictions for theft and possessing cannabis, David was not a known criminal, so the police were finding it hard to come up with a motive and spoke to as many people as possible who knew him to try to find one. They even conducted an underwater search of the nearby River Thames, but came up with nothing. An unnamed friend of David's told reporters that David was a successful businessman, but he also dealt hard drugs. The unnamed friend went on to say, "He was into drugs in a big way, and I know he had a gun. It was just a matter of time before something like this happened to him. He was mixing with the big boys and had upset a few people along the way. It was a high-risk game, and he lost." But David's family denied the allegations, stating that David was a family man and a businessman and not into dealing drugs. Police said that at the time of David's death, there would have been 1 or 2 people in the back of the car, and the killer or killers would have been heavily bloodstained. With no other leads to follow up on, police decided to create a reconstruction of David's movements on the day he died. At around 7:50 p.m, David had gone to Mushtaq Sweet Centre on Stratford Road in Spark Hill, Birmingham. He was with his 2 business partners and they had something to eat. David's business partners said that he left at around 8 p.m, saying he was going to visit his sons in Ward End, but instead David went in the opposite direction towards Handsworth. It is not known why. At some point during the evening, eyewitnesses said that they saw David's green Saab car with 3 men inside doing a U-turn at the junction of Forge Lane and Newton Road. And another eyewitness told the police that between 12:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m, they saw David's green Saab parked in the car park on Forge Lane, also known as Lovers Lane, with a BMW car parked alongside it. But when the police tried to contact this eyewitness, they discovered that the eyewitness had given them a false name and a false number. Forensic detectives carried out forensic tests on the car that David had been found in and discovered a partial fingerprint set in blood on the pillar of the car door that had been lifted from the crime scene. When they ran the partial fingerprint, it matched up to 39-year-old Bashir Ahmed of Sparkhill, Birmingham. Bashir Ahmed was David Gooden's business partner, one of the ones who had been last seen with David at Mushtaq Sweet Centre on Stratford Road, just before David had made the fateful 8-mile drive to Handsworth, where he would be found executed at the wheel of his car. Bashir had owned a pizza shop, and he was also the co-owner of Secure Keys Properties with David. Police moved in to arrest Bashir, but discovered he had flown to Spain. On his return from Spain, armed police were waiting for him at Heathrow Airport, where he was handcuffed and arrested and taken back to a Birmingham police station. And when questioned about his fingerprints being found on the car that David had been executed in, Bashir said that he was the guarantor of David's hire car, so of course his fingerprints would be there, and he denied any involvement in David's murder. Bashir was set to go to trial, charged with the execution-style murder of 33-year-old David Gooden, and he was held on remand in Winson Green Prison, now known as HMP Birmingham. But for some reason, police began to question the evidence of the bloody fingerprint that was found on the car door pillar, and after concerns about their findings, they demanded further tests on the fingerprint from an independent expert. On New Year's Eve 1997, a detailed examination was carried out on the fingerprint in London in front of forensic experts from both the prosecution and the defence teams, where it could not be determined if the fingerprint had been made in blood at the time of the murder or if the fingerprint had been there from before the murder and had then been covered in blood at the time of the murder, meaning that forensic experts couldn't decide if Bashir had committed the murder and left his partial fingerprint behind in blood as he escaped from the vehicle, or if the fingerprint was already on the door pillar as Bashir had been in the car with David several times before as they were business partners, and then after the unknown murderer was escaping from the car, they had unknowingly splashed some blood on the fingerprint that was already there from before. With all three forensic experts unable to answer this question, it cast serious doubts on the evidence, and the prosecution had to admit in court that they no longer had a case against Bashir Ahmed. And with that, the case collapsed and Bashir was free to go, discharged by Judge Peter Crawford, QC. After the verdict, outside the court, David's family were angry and shouted abuse at Bashir, but he was quickly bundled into a car by two burly friends of his and driven away. David Gooden's mum, Myrtle Hanson, said, "I can't believe he has been set free. I want justice. Someone killed my son. Where is he? Why has he not been brought to justice?" Whilst David's sister, 28-year-old Fiona Hanson, said, "The police are to blame for all this. The case has ended up a complete shambles." Bashir Ahmed had been in prison on remand for 10 months, and whilst he was in prison, he was forced to shut down his pizza shop, and the letting agency that he co-owned with David was forced to close also. Bashir was considering legal action against the police and was suing West Midlands Police Force. Of it, Bashir said, "I kept telling them I would never harm David. He was like a brother to me. But they took no notice. Everything is ruined, and I had a dreadful time in Winson Green Prison. For the first 7 months, I was locked up for 24 hours a day. I've never been in a place like Winson Green Prison. It made me ill, but I prayed to get out." Sukhminder Johal, the defence for Bashir, expressed his anger that further tests were not carried out on the fingerprints sooner, which he said would have cast doubts on the original findings. Sukhminder Johal also said, "We were afraid that we would have a miscarriage of justice case on our hands. It's scandalous that a conviction could be secured on such flimsy evidence. It has destroyed my client's life." Till this day, almost 29 years after the murder of David Gooden, nobody has ever been caught for his murder.